The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus went to his hometown and his disciples accompanied him. With the coming of the Sabbath, he began teaching in the synagogue, and most of them were astonished when they heard him. They said, "Where did the man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been granted him, and these miracles that are worked through him? This is the carpenter, surely the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joset, and Jude and Simon. His brothers too, his sisters too, are they not here with us?" And they would not accept him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is only despised in his own country, among his own relations and his own house." And he could work no miracle there, though he cured a few sick people by laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. The Gospel of the Lord. So the second reading we have this morning finishes on a rather strange note, a bit of a paradox. St. Paul says, "It's when I am weak that I'm strong." Sounds like a contradiction in terms. What's he getting at? Well, he starts by describing a very personal experience for him. He says, "I've got a thorn in my flesh. An angel of Satan has been sent to beat me." Well, clearly something's bothering Paul. There's some kind of affliction from which he's suffering. And you get the sense that it's not here today, gone tomorrow. It's persistent. It keeps going and going and going. So what is it? What's up with Paul? What's happened? Well, we don't actually know. He doesn't tell us clearly what this thorn in his flesh is, this angel of Satan that keeps beating him over and over. But it's given rise to a bunch of speculations. What could it possibly be? Well, Paul's a bit of a letter writer. Maybe his eyesight's failing. Paul was an apostle and a traveller. Maybe he's got sciatica. Maybe he's in bed with a bad back. Paul's a pretty fiery character. You find that out when you read his letters. Maybe he's struggling with some aspect of his personality. He's got a bad temper, lacks patience maybe. Some have suggested that this phrase, having a thorn in the flesh, might be referring to a persistent kind of temptation that Paul just keeps struggling with and battling. Later on, Paul describes persecutions, insults, hardships. Maybe that's what he's talking about. Paul goes around establishing Christian communities in all of these places, and then when he leaves, others come and undermine the gospel that he's preached. All sorts of obstacles that he faces from the outside. Well, even though we don't know what this thorn in the flesh is, we find out what it causes Paul to do. He says, "I prayed and I prayed and I prayed 3 times. I've been asking God, I've been pleading God to take this thorn out of my flesh." And perhaps you can imagine the kind of prayer that Paul is praying here. Well, Lord, it's not just that this is causing me pain, but it's stopping me from doing your work. If I could see better, I could write more. If I didn't have a bad back, I could travel more. If it wasn't for these people who stand in my way, I could get to my destination a lot quicker, a lot easier. And that's not just good for me, that's good for you too, Lord. So how about doing us both a favour? Because my struggle doesn't make sense to me. Well, Paul gets his answer. My grace is enough for you. 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 My grace is enough for you My power is at its best in weakness. Somehow, this thorn in the flesh is the thing that keeps Paul humble. It's the very means by which Paul recognises how much he needs God. After all, what did this thorn in the flesh cause him to do? Pray and pray and pray. In my insufficiency, in my inadequacy, in my weakness, I now turn to the Lord and say, Lord, I can't do it. Not by myself. No, I need you. And so I think Paul realises that that thorn is going to stay in his flesh. Precisely because this is what brings him close to God. I think just quietly we can have a temptation to see holiness a lot like Paul sees it at the beginning. To imagine that, you know what, the goal in life here is to become so perfectly put together that I don't need God's help anymore. That I'm able to say to the Lord, you know what, you can look after someone else because I'm just fine. You don't need to pay me any attention, Lord, I've got this. It's in hand. As if to say, you know what, Lord, I'm going to make it to the destination without any problem, so you can go and pay attention to someone else for a bit. That's what the saints are, surely. No. It turns out that the goal here isn't simply to arrive at a destination. The goal here is a friendship. The goal here is intimacy with Jesus. For us to recognise that, you know what? We need him. The life of a saint is not one that has grown independent of God. The life of a saint is the one which has grown most dependent upon God. In fact, it's peeling away the illusion of independence and recognising that, you know what, we just need him. At every step and at every stage, we need him. The Lord doesn't just want us to arrive at a destination. He wants us to arrive at that destination in closest friendship with him. Because he'll have been the one who got us there. I think St. Paul leaves this phrase vague for a good reason. We don't know his thorn in the flesh. But I think he leaves it vague precisely so that we might let our imagines run wild and then perhaps recognise our own thorns in the flesh. Those things about which we've prayed and prayed and prayed, Lord, take it away, take it away, take it away. When in actual fact the Lord will reply, but if I take it away, you'll run away. If I take it away, you'll imagine that it's you on your own. And it's not. Look at the transformation that happens in Paul. He goes from this insistent prayer, Lord, remove this, remove this, remove this, to this. I shall be very happy to make my weaknesses my special boast, so that the power of Christ may stay over me. And that's why I'm quite content with my weaknesses, and with insults and hardships, persecutions, and the agonies I go through for Christ's sake. These weaknesses now are not simply something that Paul sees as the burden that he needs to bear and that he's just waiting for the Lord to take care of. He now sees that this thorn in his flesh is something about which he can boast. He brags about his weaknesses now. because these obstacles in his path aren't simply a hindrance, they actually mark out the path. This is where I need to go with my Lord. These weaknesses now and this thorn in his flesh is the very thing that's enabled Paul to grab a hold of Jesus and not let go. Or perhaps the invitation is then made to us. These thorns in our flesh, they're the means to our humility, to lay hold of Jesus and never let go.